This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. Like many people, I've come into the new year full of hopes and aspirations for the next 12 months. Maybe, like me, you're anxiously pacing the floor waiting for the F1 season to begin, or perhaps you've set yourself a more regular fitness goal, like running your first marathon or commuting to work by bike. Whatever you plan to do in 2025, come into your own way with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Powered by Live Hydroscience, Liquid IV helps you break the mould. Liquid IV is so easy and convenient to tear, pour and enjoy, and it comes in several fantastic flavours, like their new Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free Raspberry Lemonade, and other winners like White Peach and Rainbow Sherbet. As a regular flyer, I know how easy it is to become dehydrated almost without knowing it when you're travelling. That's why I always take Liquid IV on overseas trips. It's more than just a drink, and it's scientifically formulated to hydrate better than water alone. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water provides 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. And what's more, it's always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free and soy-free. Embrace your ritual with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code THERACE at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code THERACE at liquidiv.com.
As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code THEATHLETIC. Make your first deposit of at least $10, place your first bet on any game, and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed, for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free Second Look review. Second Look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
The Athletic.
The race is on, and what is going on at Ferrari, which has gone from pre-season threat to biggest disappointment in the first 2 races of the season? I'm Edd Straw, and joining me to peer behind the scenes at Maranello and discuss whether all is lost or there is still hope are Ben Anderson and Roberto Boccafogli. Well, delighted to have you, Roberto. Obviously, you part of the race's new Italian YouTube channel, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you. Obviously, you've been around in motorsport for many years.
Many decades.
So tell us a bit about your background, because you've done quite a bit on both sides of the fence, we could say.
Yeah. I am a journalist, and I follow motorsport since now 45 years. I followed Formula One, following all the Grand Prix the first year in 1986. And it was a glorious time of Prost and Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet. And Ayrton was not even in McLaren. And then I left it for some periods. Then I went back following for Pirelli as per their communication between 2014 and 2021. Then I left again for 1 season, and I was back with Ferrari 23 and mid-24, half 24, once again for their communication. So now it's 6 months, 7 months that I'm not following directly, but I do very much from home.
And now the Race Italian YouTube channel that's very recently launched. So how's that going?
It started from zero, from the ground. So we are very positive, of course, because we start seeing signs of interest from our people. We must thank very much what comes from Great Britain, so what comes from yourself, guys, because we simply adapted to our Italian taste and so on. But we have made very few little things just from our own, but we plan to do something more. But the basis that comes from you is so rich and so powerful that I'm sure that working about it for a while can produce big interest in Italy.
Well, you can definitely come again if you're going to be that positive about what we do. And Ben, obviously you're available, which is why you're on the podcast, as always. But also, people may not know you're sort of the day-to-day video empire of the race overlord, as well as being an F1 journalist of some repute yourself. So I guess having Italy in the fold, along with the various other places we've got, as well as the English language YouTube, there's plenty to keep you busy.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a huge audience on YouTube. It's mind-boggling actually how the race has managed to find that sweet spot of hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people interested in the content we produce there, and it's exciting to be able to expand the output. So welcoming Italy to the fold is lovely. We already have our Spanish language channel, our Brazilian channel, and also we've expanded into the Middle East this season with an Arabic channel as well. So it's looking up for the race in video at the moment. We're very busy. I have a great audience there, and it keeps us very busy, and you very busy, Ed, because you also contribute to that, as well as hosting our flagship F1 podcast.
Of course. I mean, obviously, podcast is where it's really at with the race, but the video side, the YouTube side's a nice little sideline for us. So,
well, they're on video now too, aren't they?
Well, yes,
increasingly. So it's all merging together into one gigantic output.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the platforms sort of expand and merge. Who knows what we'll be doing in 10 years' time. But anyway, there's loads for us to talk about this week, and we'll be hearing from Yuki Tsunoda later in the podcast as part of a report on his pre-Japanese Grand Prix weekend activities. But seeing as we've got Roberto on, the Italian perspective is particularly valuable for the main topic, which is Ferrari. Now, it's been a disappointing start for Ferrari, hasn't it? So how are the Tifosi taking this after so much excitement pre-season and then so much disappointment, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of those 2 disqualifications in China?
So, to me, the main word is surprise, because it was very much surprising starting not at the level that everybody were expecting, because if you remember some words at the presentation, at first Lewis' appearance in Marelli and so on, there was a very, very strong feeling about the possibility to be competitive quite soon. Then Australia was quite disappointing, at least because it was so clear that McLaren was so much in front. And it is true, as Fred Vasseur always says, the gaps are so tight between McLaren and Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferrari. So things can change and will for sure change over the season. But yes, Melbourne was disappointing. Then China. In China, all of a sudden, everything appeared to be very fantastic. A lot of solution found and so on, to the point where Lewis was winning on Saturday. I tell you, that win was really strong. I remember on Italian TV, every reaction from the Tifosi and so on were incredible. Lewis. It looked something very, very close to the Michael Schumacher era, because all the incredible love for Michael was back now for Lewis, considering that the love of the Tifosi and of Italy for Charles Leclerc is a fantastic love. But anyway, Lewis is Lewis. He's 7-time world champion and so on. Unfortunately, a new Sunday happened because all the enthusiastic result of Saturday disappeared totally on Sunday, even before the disqualification, because, of course, both cars were not even close to that competitiveness of Saturday. So the point was, what's happening? What has happened? And then when you close with a double disqualification was very bad. Just remember that Ferrari lost more than 50% of their points on that point. I mean, they could be at 35, now they are 17. This was a huge loss, a very huge loss. So it was absolutely disappointing. But once again, to me, the most feeling is surprise, even more than disappointment. And as Mr. Vasseur says, it was a absolutely unlucky weekend, too many little mistakes and so on, blah, blah, blah. We are just waiting for Suzuka now.
Now, if this was 1991 or something like that, there'd be all sorts of talk about changing the leadership and everything would be all over the place and there'd be politics and shouting in the media. So
not even 1991, Ed, even 2022, there would be this talk.
Well, that's true. But it sounds, Roberto, like it's relatively calm and it's just, look, we still have the faith. Let's just give it a little bit of time.
It's calm because the board of Ferrari is very calm. At least they say they are. I'm sure that Mr. Vigna is, of course, himself disappointed and sorry, but working very much on the setting Ferrari has got now, which means Mr. Vasseur, lots of power have been given. Vasseur now has got the team that he wanted to have with Loic Serra, with Jérôme D'Ambrosio. I mean, now it's full of his people, and he's the kind of a guy, you know him better than me, even if I was working with him for 12 months, but he's a person who likes to build the team around himself, like everybody else when they want to win consistently, I think. Now he got it. He got also Lewis, and Lewis was an incredible strong coming into the team, not only for the Tifosi, but for the team itself. I mean, people are for sure incredibly excited on the idea of working with Lewis, and Lewis is rewarding that because I remember Lewis at the McLaren times and especially at the Mercedes time. These first 2 months in Ferrari, he has been incredibly warm and kind and open to the Tifosi and smiling and so on. So for sure, he also feels that he's in a special place. Ferrari feels he's a special driver, but Lewis feels he's in a special place. So maybe it's just a question of giving time to the ingredients to melt. Maybe. Let's hope so.
Ben, to bring you in.
Hi.
I sensed a possible undertone of scepticism from your brief interjection earlier. Do you think that this will be allowed to play out? And do you think that perhaps the fact that Ferrari started last year sort of okay but behind means people can look at it and think, oh, actually, well, Ferrari can sort of start a little bit behind but get into a point where they're threatening for championships?
Well, I think what Roberto said about the management board and Vasseur being aligned, that's crucial because Vasseur is a Vigna guy. So that gives him the time almost automatically because there isn't this inherent distrust. It's like he's already proven himself to be an effective leader. We've eulogized many times about how stable, calm, methodical Ferrari is compared to the recent past, let alone the 90s or even more shambolic eras of Ferrari. So Vasseur has a lot of credit. I think the fact the season has started poorly, it's only 2 races. So he will always say, well, it's 24 races. Things can change so quickly. Look how they themselves came into the constructors fight almost unexpectedly last season, having messed up with that Spanish Grand Prix upgrade that took a long time to unpick and probably in the end denied them a possible constructors title. Tempered with that is a feeling that I just wonder if they've slightly flown too close to the sun with this redesign. McLaren obviously went bold with their concept for this year, mentioned that they needed to because of how close the gaps are. They've started basically without losing anything from the end of last year. They're ahead. Everyone accepts they're ahead. Ferrari were right with them pretty much, I think, by the end of last season, but they seem to have started behind their own curve. Testing was a bit disappointing. I feel like in Melbourne, the way they lost pace from Friday through the rest of the weekend just feels like the window they need to run the car in is a bit too narrow and they can't get into it comfortably. Shanghai, they managed to get into that window, but then the difference between Saturday and Sunday, the setup changes they need to make, coupled with the fact they had to fill the car up with more fuel. Suddenly they're into the ride height problems again. Lewis, his car ends up, wearing the plank too much. Leclerc's car's underweight. That suggests to me they're running really close to the limit on everything just to stay in the fight. And I think the positive thing is Lewis and how he's performed. I suppose you can't really be surprised by a 7 times world champion, but I feel like his start's been more impressive than I expected, and certainly his progression from one race to the next has been super impressive. I don't think we've seen the best of Leclerc, that said. But, to describe the weekend as unlucky, the Ferrari engineers shouldn't be running that car so close to the limit that it could get excluded. They almost indicated it was Pirelli to blame for the tyres wearing out too much or unexpectedly aggressively in China. But they weren't on an unusual strategy like George Russell was in Spa the year before. It wasn't an outlier, so they should have been able to take account of those things. I think it's sort of unexpectedly messy, and I think that's been driven by the fact that the car is just not performing as well as they hoped and isn't as easy to make perform as maybe they expected.
Obviously, Roberto, Fred Vasseur is a great calming influence at that team in a situation like this. I think everyone in motorsport knows what he's like. But what's the perception of Fred Vasseur in Italy as a whole? If you read, Gazzetta or Corriere della Sera, all of the big news outlets, whether they're specialist sport or wider ones, is Fred Vasseur seen as a kind of new Jean Todt type figure? Is he someone who everyone's convinced will lead Ferrari back to glory? Or is there still something he needs to prove, I guess, with just sheer success to convince everyone?
Wow, what a question. So, can I start from a little bit back? Fred Vasseur came and he won a Grand Prix. He won that Singapore Grand Prix in 2023 season, so he was immediately the hero. So he was for sure starting strongly, well accepted by people in Tifosi and so on. He plays the part of the man who says, let's stay calm, let's not get over enthusiasm, let's not excite too much, let's not be too much disappointed, let's try to stay stable and so on, which is not exactly the normal mood in Italy, and he tries to play it to stay on an average, and for sure he's accepted as a very efficient guy, and myself I also consider him a strongly efficient guy. Then last year he started very strong. You remember he made 1-2 in Australia and early immediately. Then they has been recalled the bad moment in June. After the evolution in Imola didn't work so much, they were incredibly strong in Monte Carlo, which is a story apart, but there was a disaster in Spain and so on. They lost all June. And in the end, if you see the numbers, if you see the points, that is the moment where Ferrari lost the chance to fight for the World Championship. They could be World Champion last year. So all this said is to mean that Fred Vasseur is perceived as a strong guide from Ferrari. People for sure trust him. As we said before, the board of Ferrari do trust him for the same kind of reason. Vigna, but especially, we didn't say earlier, but especially Mr. Elkann, the president, is the guy who got him in and is absolutely trusting very much Fred. But it's very true. Last weekend, the good operating window for Ferrari was too narrow. This pushed the technicians to risk too much, because this is the very point why they've been disqualified. And this is perceived like a weak point. So why there were so strong points, so strong words, so big smiles because the championship started. And now are you forced to fight so much over the limit if you want just to stay close to McLaren, which was not too close, because Ferrari and McLaren in the race in China were more than a second apart. McLaren was very much faster. Even Mercedes was faster than Ferrari there. So, something in Ferrari in China was wrong. Okay, I was wrong just when I said bad luck bad luck weekend. It was not only a question of luck, of course. There have been mistakes made, but there is a trust in the ways Mr. Vasseur is ruling the whole thing. There is a big trust because he was convincing Mr. Hamilton to come. So this was a more proof. I mean, Hamilton and Leclerc are for sure an incredibly strong couple of drivers for Ferrari. So theoretically, everything is perfect. The car doesn't look so easygoing as maybe somebody was wishing, because if you see McLaren, for McLaren, everything is super easy. For Mercedes, at least for George Russell, not so bad. Antonelli is making an incredible job immediately with no experience. Even Red Bull, that is, of course, not the Red Bull of 2 years ago, but in the hands of Max, is performing. They are performing. So Ferrari must find a good balance of this. For sure, something was big wrong on Saturday in China, but I'm sure that everybody in Ferrari is asking very much to Japan.
And just quickly, Roberto, because you have the advantage over us of having actually worked in Scuderia Ferrari recently under Fred Vasseur, is that confidence in Fred there inside the team as well? Is he somebody who really inspires that support and that faithfulness from everyone working for him?
He's positive over the team, and the team is trusting on him. The team is delighted to work with him. For sure. He's a very straight man. No words, no tricks and so on. He's very straight. For me, a little bit too straight sometimes. And of course...
no communications person likes the team boss to be too straight, do they?
in fact, it's not easy. But, I mean, for sure, the team estimate him very much, trust him very much. But when we say that, it's more than 1,000 people, 1,500 people. So not all of them can do on the same part of the frame, you know. For my personal feeling when I was there, so up to 8 months ago, from the pit wall, there was a big trust in him. From the drivers, there was a big trust in him. I see Hamilton trusting him very much. So in the end, the answer must be yes. The team trusts him, and when you say, and I repeat, Mr. Vigna, Mr. Red can trust him. So still the big frame is very positive. But you know, we are here to win. We are here to be faster than the others. And if the car is not there... It
gets harder too, I think, once you've built your own team.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned how he arrived as a bit of a hero, winning a race in his first season in charge. But of course, he's inherited a team from Mattia Binotto, so you almost have a free hit in the first season, because it's like, well, you know, I've just arrived. He kept talking about how in the early months, you know, he just had to get his feet under the table and work out how everything worked before kind of moulding it. And then 2024, he buys extra credit because Ferrari almost surprises itself in how competitive it is and how long it lasts in the fight for the championship. You know, you mentioned had the Spain thing gone another way, they might have actually won that championship. They certainly had the chance, but it was an unexpected chance. It always felt that they were building more for 26 rather than realistically winning titles before then. So they've kind of got ahead of their own curve. But now they've had a sort of slightly undercooked start to a season, and more of the personnel are who Vasseur wants, and the team is less and less Mattia Binotto spec Ferrari and more Fred Vasseur spec Ferrari. Your credit doesn't last forever, does it? You can't say, oh, I haven't quite got all the ingredients together. He can still say at the moment we need time. You know, Lewis is new. We're still kind of building. We're still kind of getting to know each other. But that runway only lasts for so long. So they will need to correct these kind of minor errors and make sure they don't have such significant consequences as they had in China, I think. Otherwise, as we know, and you know very well, Roberto, the Tifosi patience and the patience of the Italian nation for Ferrari's kind of self-inflicted wounds is not great.
But if I can come once again on the point, you asked me if there is any similarity between Vasseur and how he is perceived by the team and by Italy, and Jean Todt. Jean Todt came and he had to wait 5 years before winning regularly in Ferrari. 5 years. I was many times interviewing him, and a couple of times he told me, it's difficult. Sometimes I get back to my office after Grand Prix and I expect to find a white closed letter on my table, and I'm surprised they don't. And then Mr. Schumacher came and they started winning very strongly up to the 11 crowns in 6 seasons, But there was a very long path before starting winning. Vasseur came from a season that was a disaster, 2022, because the season started strongly. If you remember, then it was very poor in the end. It was starting to be a little bit more competitive up to the end of the season when they won. The 24 season, as you, Ben, said, it was fantastic because even after Spain, there were a couple of more races which were not very positive for Ferrari. But even with this, Ferrari was the team scoring more points in the second part of the championship, even more than McLaren, who made a super incredible, huge job because they didn't start winning. Red Bull did. So McLaren was like this, but Ferrari was a little bit more like this. I mean, they lost the championship for nothing in the end. So for sure, this is the Ferrari of Vasseur and how people feel it. If I must say something in which Vasseur is quite similar to Jean Todt, is that Jean Todt spent a couple of years, maybe more, to understand what Ferrari is. So quite a tricky place, many people talking, inside fights, very hidden and so on. Yeah, I think that all of these things happen everywhere, but maybe in Ferrari a little bit more. Opposite than Jean Todt, Vasseur knew it immediately. So he was presenting himself as the face of the team. So he's covering any possible inside fight and so on. He's just proposing himself as the guy to blame or as the guy to say, good job done, And in this direction, I feel him quite similar to Jean Todt. But all the rest of the story is a different story. I mean, now Ferrari know that after Binotto, after Arrivabene, after nearly everything that was after Jean Todt, what Ferrari simply needs is a very continuous, long-term period of working together and so on. And the Fred Vasseur has been taken exactly for this. So what is asked to him is a long-term job. And in this direction, I think that everybody feels that it could be the right man.
We'll get back to the podcast in a moment, but first, let me tell you about Grammarly. Your time and expertise are valuable, and with professionals spending nearly half the work week on written communication, focus is one of the most important things to have at work. With Grammarly as your AI writing partner, you can stay focused and get through your work faster with relevant, real-time suggestions wherever you write. As a journalist and podcast host, I'm constantly writing and rewriting copy and drawing up scripts. It's part of the job, and Grammarly helps make it faster with AI prompts, tone suggestions, and more. And what's more, you can enjoy it with peace of mind with Grammarly's enterprise-grade security and its business model that doesn't sell your data. Experience the gold standard of responsible AI with Grammarly, a tool that 93% of professionals report helps them get more work done. So what are you waiting for? Get more done with Grammarly. Download Grammarly free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's grammarly.com/podcast.
What does beauty have to do with sports or advanced technology or the economy? I am Isabella Rossellini, and in each episode of This Is Not a Beauty podcast, I uncover stories that explain beauty's fascinating and often hidden role in modern life. Listen to This Is Not a Beauty podcast now on your favorite podcast platform. Brought to you by L'Oréal Group.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Roberto, let's talk a little bit more about Lewis Hamilton. What impacts he had in Italy so far, particularly with that sprint win in China? Not quite Nigel Mansell 1989. Any sign of Hamilton getting his own Il Leone-style nickname or something like that?
Ooh, early to say, because Nigel was Il Leone before coming to Ferrari. He started to be Il Leone at the Williams times.
Okay.
You remember that he started winning in 86 when he lost the crown at the last Grand Prix in Adelaide because of a tire blowing up. And in 87, he got the accident in Suzuka because he was fighting very close with Nelson Piquet on the same car. Then nothing in 88, but when he came to Ferrari, it was 89 and he was already Leone. And he was very happy to be called Il Leone, and he was even acting as Il Leone. You remember as you won Brazil. I mean, Brazil was fantastic. I mean, I was in Brazil. Brazil was an impossible day. The day before the race, you could bet £1 billion on somebody else winning, not Ferrari, because Ferrari was not able to go more than 3 laps. The alternators were breaking like popcorns. So no way to hope in anything. I tell you that Nigel, I remember the story very well by himself. Nigel had as his guest the British Lines pilot of the airplane that came from London to Rio de Janeiro. He was his guest. And before the race, Nigel said to the man, "Hey, when you start rolling in the airport, please take it calm, because I'm sure that I'm going to retire with the Ferrari." So I picked the first car, I come to the airport, and we fly together to London back, okay? And then he found himself in the lead, and the car was not braking. And he was thinking, "Fuck, if you brake now, because I must get the flight." You know, the car didn't, he won, and his history as the Leone in Ferrari started exactly there on the podium. There, the myth of Nigel in Ferrari started. Nigel was Nigel, and people were totally crazy of Nigel, totally crazy, because really Nigel got something that was not existing in Ferrari for the seasons before. Now for you it's different, but
a sprint win in China seems like very little compared to all that Mansell nonsense.
I mean, he won brilliantly, because when you saw him winning like that, I mean, to me, he got an incredible big technical advantage to be in the clean air, just leading and so on.
Yeah.
But he was driving brilliantly. I was surprised when Fred Vasseur gave an interview to L'Equipe last week, saying, I also received questions about Lewis. Somebody says that Lewis he was worn out, but is not worn out because it was going very well last year, blah, blah, blah. Nobody says that he's worn out. Nobody at all. We expect big things. Everybody in Italy expects incredibly big things from Hamilton. Now Hamilton has to perform. Once again, I can tell you that Hamilton was really facing this big enthusiasm by the Tifosi and so on the right way. He was very strong, very positive, very smiling, starting talking something in Italy and so on. He was really efficient on that. His team is driving him very well. His personal communication and support team is driving him very well. Now, let's say what goes on, because now Lewis is nearly with nothing in his hands after 2 races. He can get a little bit nervous sometimes. The radio connections in Australia and in China was not exactly what we would expect from a team which is exactly calm and peaceful and so on. Once again, let's see. Mr. Vasseur says that the car is not wrong. So we must absolutely believe him. But we can believe him for, we are at the 3rd race now. We cannot believe for 10 more races to understand if the car is wrong or not. I don't know if you share it.
No, well, if the car is not wrong and it's right, then it has to be running at the front. I must admit, having watched it from trackside a lot in testing in the first 2 races, I'm repeating myself from previous podcasts, but it's never completely convinced me, because it looks good at times, but it's just doing things you don't want it to do a little bit too much. But Ben, how do you judge the start Hamilton's made, I was a little bit concerned going into the season, just exactly where he was. But actually, quite quickly, any concern there was eliminated for me. I can see the way he's chipping away at things. And in some areas, he's quicker than Leclerc, and he's learning from Leclerc as well in terms of getting the most out of the car. So, positive impression for me. Do you share that?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised. I have to say I was in the skeptics camp. I felt like maybe the Mercedes grind and the way George Russell gradually got on top of him over the 3 years, because it wasn't just a 1 year thing. Like, Russell was putting him under more and more pressure, and then last season was emphatic. It just looked to me like this is the sign that, as every superstar athlete eventually has to face, this cliff edge, this point where you just start to, even if you don't tumble over the other side of it like some guys do, you just start to slip down and everything gets a bit harder and some younger, faster guys take over. But uncoupling 2024 from the fact it was his dead rubber last season with Mercedes, when he'd already announced he was leaving, there was always this sort of clause that said, well, it could all be because of that. The motivation goes down. You're not building the project anymore. You're thinking about going somewhere else. The team has a different feeling towards you. I think he's had the benefit of the new manager bounce, as they call it in football, going into a new place, a new start. Obviously, Ferrari's like a bucket list team for everyone. I think it was Vettel who said everyone's a Ferrari fan at heart. So there's that element of Lewis just getting some new enthusiasm from things being fresh and different. As Roberto mentioned, some messiness. Vasseur would say it's understandable in terms of the radio communications because it's a new relationship and you almost have to make mistakes to find out the right balance. It's just unfortunate those mistakes have to be public. Performance-wise, he's compared quite well to Leclerc. I think he was quite clearly a step behind in the dry sessions in Melbourne. He just looked like he didn't have the same confidence, particularly on the throttle, as Leclerc. China was better. I think Lewis probably started... he said that he went into the weekend with set-up suggestions. He was going to take more control of the situation. I think he did hit the ground running. That doesn't mean that he's a genius, because I think he's often done that at Mercedes and it hasn't worked. It just so happens that this time it did. And I think that carried him very well in the early part of the weekend. But we didn't see the best of Leclerc in the race. He was quicker than Lewis, even with the broken wing. Leclerc felt if the wing hadn't broken, he would have been up with the leaders, possibly challenging the McLarens on pace. So I feel like there's still some touch points in the data that we're not able to really drill down into. We need a bit more clarity. The weekends have been too messy to get a completely fair comparison. You would expect Leclerc still to have the edge, and I think he does. I think their driving styles are coalescing a bit, but Leclerc just has that little bit more, as you'd expect, like inherent confidence in how to manipulate the car, particularly using the throttle, and Lewis is catching up, or still working to catch up in that regard. I think if Leclerc had been able to run the race in China that he wanted to with a fixed car, it felt like maybe he sacrificed qualifying a bit in order to facilitate that. We might be looking at this as a slightly different comparison and go, oh, okay, that's actually the real deficit Hamilton's got. And it's almost the inverse of what we expected. We kind of thought, Leclerc's going to be really hard to catch over one lap, but Lewis has got this kind of inherent strength in the races. So many examples through history of him just pummeling his teammate on race day. Even Russell, found Lewis a tough nut to crack on a Sunday. But I think, if anything, in the start to 2025, it showed us that Leclerc has an edge in the races, perhaps more so than in qualifying at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's going to need a little bit longer for Hamilton to settle in. I always think you want to give them a good half season, but promising start so far. Let's talk about his replacement at Mercedes. He says he's not Lewis Hamilton's replacement, but obviously he literally is. Kimi Antonelli, who we have briefly mentioned. Now, Roberto, seeing as we're throwing all things Italian at you, what's the perspective of Kimi Antonelli in Italy? We always hear about how Ferrari's everything there and drivers are relegated to sort of fifth billing behind Ferrari monopolising everybody's attention. Does anyone in Italy care that there's an Italian driver with this much excitement? And what impression has he made with his decent start in terms of picking up some decent results in Australia and China?
Everybody's starting care. Everybody cares more and more, because I think that what Kimi showed in both weekends was absolutely unbelievable. He was very fast. He was very strong, except from one mistake in the very start of the season. Then he was very regular, very competitive, very intelligent, very, very smart, very strong in overtaking maneuvers. I mean, he's absolutely a guy who can perform big things. I mean, I'm not comparing like somebody did. I'm not comparing Antonelli with the Lewis Hamilton, who in 2007 came into McLaren fighting against Alonso, who was already twice world champion and so on. It is clear that George Russell is extremely strong, extremely positive, strong, competitive, continuous, everything. He's a fantastic driver for Mercedes. So Antonelli has a very big peak to try to reach, But yes, for sure, he started very, very strongly. I cannot say that the attention is so violently coming on Antonelli, but there is more and more attention. Yes, also because he's good. He never overtalk. He never overbehaves. Nothing. He's very, very delicate. Toto Wolff manages him in a fantastic way with a lot of attention and so on. I think that from Antonelli we have seen, in terms of attention from the Italian viewers and the tifosis on him, we have seen not even the 10%. We will see more. For sure we will see more.
Ben, what have you made of his on-track performance in terms of the first few weekends? How good a start has he made as an F1 driver?
I think very good. He looks very assured. He looks at home in Formula One. Bearing in mind he's got the pressure of racing for what still is a top team as a rookie. It's not like he's getting the chance to do his learning, near the back of the field or in the midfield, slightly out of the limelight. He's right in there, and he doesn't look out of place. He sounds and comes across in very mature. This is one of the things that I remember. I know the Verstappen comparison has been made, by Toto Wolff. It's like this is our equivalent, having missed out on Max 8 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, I should say. And I remember Helmut Marko and everyone really at Red Bull remarking how mature Max was, even as a 17-year-old when he was just coming into Formula One. Marko used to say he talks as if he's a guy of 25 rather than a teenager. And I think Antonelli has a similar quality. You listen to him speak about his racing and he doesn't sound like is he 18 yet? I think he might just be 18. Doesn't really sound like...
You have to be 18.
Yeah, he doesn't sound like an 18-year-old. So I think that's to his advantage too, and probably helps him process everything that's happening. Yeah, as Roberto says, Russell is such a high benchmark for him to hit, and I think you could see in China qualifying the challenge Antonelli has there, because it's Russell who was able to work out through trial and error that the tyre preparation secret that he needed to effectively over-qualify that car, and that isn't coming to Antonelli yet. It's not. He hasn't lucked into it, and he's going to have to discover it. And like all the rookies, good or bad, you have this basically learning process with the tyres that you can't really shortcut. And even a driver as accomplished now as Oscar Piastri, has yo-yoed, hasn't he, from the first season not being able to do the race stints to then last season not really being able to nail the qualifying laps. Now it seems to be kind of coalescing in year 3. I think that in itself buys Antonelli a bit of time because it's so difficult to do. He's got a good example to follow in Russell. Whether he can nail that consistently or not, we'll see. But the race performance in Melbourne, it's such an awful race to manage, where so many rookies and also experienced drivers made mistakes or got caught out in difficult conditions and by white lines, etc. For him to race through like that and finish in the top 4, I mean, that should give him and everyone else as much confidence as they need in his ability, I think.
I think it's important that he banked some good results early on. I don't think in terms of kind of overall laps and overall races we've really seen that sheer speed, but we are seeing it in flashes. He looks good on track. He's still, as he said himself, asked him about this in China, he's still sort of pushing the entries a little bit too much. He just needs to consolidate it all. But of course, he's an 18-year-old rookie, and I think having had that crash at Monza last year in FP1, I think it was really important. He came into this year and banked a couple of solid results early on. And of course, in China, he had damage. He picked up some damage to the floor from the debris from the Leclerc-Hamilton collision at turn 2. So it wasn't his fault. He was struggling in the race and off the pace. So I think he's got a nice, calm foundation. But just to sort of speculate on what impact he can have, Roberto, let's say Antonelli delivers on what many expect him to do and he starts winning races. Maybe he could have been maybe he could even be an Italian world champion. It's a long time since I've won one of those. Even you weren't covering F1 back in the time that Antonio Ascari. Yeah. I was thinking the last world champion was Alberto Ascari, wasn't it?
And also the first
you're
one.
going back to
because
the only one. Exactly. So that's very much before your time. But obviously Alboreto, as you say, he was the last kind of championship contender from Italy. Is there room for an Italian driving hero independent of Ferrari?
So the question will be forever now, I think, because I cannot see Mercedes and Toto Wolff leaving him. And the question will be, okay, why Antonelli is winning with Mercedes, not with Ferrari at that point? Because Antonelli was scouted by Ferrari years ago, I think, under the Binotto's era, and somebody didn't trust him enough to drive him to progress into the academy. But they had the possibility to do something with Antonelli. And then they were overtaken by Toto. Toto understood very clearly, and he did what he did. Yes, Antonelli can be something giving some, some fire to the point. Because if Antonelli is capable to win, as Lewis was capable to win on his first year in McLaren, and Ferrari is not on the right side of the classifications, yes, for sure there will be polemics. So even Antonelli can win with the Mercedes, why not with the Ferrari? Ferrari is losing by Antonelli, who is just 18, and he got his proper driving license just by Christmas last year, and so on. Yes, for sure. There will be some speculation, there will be some polemics and so on. But seriously speaking, Antonelli is a driver who was trusted by Mercedes, and Mercedes made an incredible job with him. And I totally follow Ben when he said that in Melbourne he really offered a performance that is even difficult to believe, because it was incredible in the worst possible changing, varying conditions over the race on a very tricky track, and on a day where all the rookies made something wrong. He did not. I mean, to me, is a super one, absolutely a super one. Yes, for sure, if he starts winning before Ferrari starts, something can happen.
I should say in Australia, he was quite close to joining Doohan in the barriers. He had a big moment on the first lap, and he had his own spin after dropping a wheel, but very excusable in those conditions. But like I say, I think because it wasn't a brilliant charge from 16th to 4th or anything, it was just those moments aside which he dealt with well once he started having them. It was just the fact he could string it together and bank those results. So I think that's a nice foundation for him.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Campfire season's back, and that means s'mores. But when you're at home treating yourself, take them over ice with Dunkin' S'mores Cold Brew Concentrate. And suddenly you're always treating yourself. The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be. Click or tap the banner to shop now.
Hi, this is Debbie, your Blinds.com design consultant.
Oh, wow. A real person.
Yep, I am here to help you with everything, from selecting the perfect window treatments to...
Well, I've got a complicated project.
Oh, not a problem. I can even schedule a professional measure and install. We can also send you samples, fast and free.
I just might have to do more.
Oh, okay.
So the first room we're looking at is for guests.
Shop Blinds.com now and save up to 45% site-wide. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
We'll be back with Ben and Roberto shortly, but there's been plenty going on in Japan, particularly with the excitement building for Yuki Tsunoda's Red Bull Racing debut. We'll hear from Yuki himself shortly, but his first public appearance since the news was confirmed happened in Tokyo at Honda's Welcome Plaza. So let's hear from someone you won't have heard from on the podcast before, but who is one of the many unsung heroes of the race who do all the hard work while the likes of myself and my F1 colleagues steal all the credit. Our video production manager, Luke Hinsull, who was there on Sunday.
Yes, so this was at Honda's Welcome Plaza, which was in its final day, and there was a set of talks which had lots of different drivers from and riders from Trials, MotoGP, obviously Takuma Sato, Indy 500 winner, and then Tsunoda. And I had to get up really early to even get into the queue to get a ticket. Like, I got there at just gone 7:30, and I was probably about a couple of hundred people back already, and there was only a handful of people behind me in the queue when they stopped taking people in. So it was already like going to be bonkers, and so many people already there just to get a ticket. So we all got our queue all got ticketed by ballot, which I thought was a very fair way to do things. You draw a stick out and you get to work out where you're going to stand, and there's like 5 different blocks or so. I was in B block, and everyone has to line up in order. And then it was really interesting to sort of see how quiet but really enthusiastic everybody was. Like, it was just such a nice, strong support for Yuki Tsunoda. We all got filed in. I was lucky enough to stand at the side of the stairs that Yuki came down as well. A lot of cheers, really, really good. He did not seem fazed by everything as well. Like, he took it all in his stride. I think he's probably very comfortable being at home as well. So he came down the stairs, got on stage. The initial questioning was about, obviously, the change to Red Bull. Again, didn't seem fazed for a man that was getting into a doomed seat, so to speak. Obviously, you've got the history of Gasly, Albon, Perez, and now Lawson as well. So he took all the questions on the chin, from what I could gather anyway. And then I know that one key bit, he was asked if he could what he could return or get results of this weekend, and he had a cheeky grin and like hinted at a podium. I definitely picked that up when I was listening to it via Google Translate, and there was a big cheer there. So yeah, a lot of strong home support. He's pretty pumped up for this. I think he's got a lot that he wants to prove to people as well. There's something about Yuki's confidence at the moment. He's really got something going on for him, and it felt like everybody like believed it as well. It wasn't just like oh yeah, here's our home favourite guy. Like, it was like, oh, this guy could actually do this. All in all, very, very good day for Tsunoda, a good day for the fans, a good day for Honda as well. And it was a good day for me as well. I enjoyed being out in the crowd and chatting to them in my terrible Japanese.
Great stuff from Luke there. Now, that wasn't Tsunoda's only appearance, as the main event was the Red Bull showrun on the streets of Tokyo that took place today, and Scott Mitchell-Malm landed in Tokyo after a 17-hour journey and hot-footed it straight there to tell you all about it.
So I'm here on the outskirts of the Tokyo showrun course. I almost called it a circuit. I suppose it technically is, but obviously not a track as we know it. I've seen a few showruns at this point in time as I record this, but it's been a little bit of a subdued affair and a little bit of a disappointment. A great turnout initially from the fans, and obviously a lot of excitement and everybody kind of waiting with anticipation to hear the cars fire up and then obviously head out onto the circuit. But it took a long time for that to happen. About 45 minutes after the show run was actually due to start was when we finally saw, I think, an F1 car. We did get Max Verstappen and Liam Lawson driving hybrid concept Hondas very briefly, but not really what the crowd came here to see. And another little bit of a disappointment, well, actually a big disappointment for me personally, and I'm sure anyone that was actually aware that it was going to be here, is that they had to ditch, it seems, the Honda RA272 runs, which Tsunoda was due to drive. That's a big shame, because that's a fantastic car. Oh, well, there's one firing up right now. I picked a great time to record this. What's that? That's one of the RB7s. Listen to that. Bit of ambient noise for you, everybody. That's Isaac Hadjar in a Racing Bulls liveried RB7. And I tell you what, there's a really tight hairpin on this part of the course. And Hadjar just can't quite get it right. He's just about to come past. Listen to this. There you go, that'll bust the audio. We might have to completely scratch this, but hopefully it's usable. Yeah, so it's a really tight hairpin, and Hadjar, bless him, every time he's come through, he's needed a bit of help to get the car around. It's one where he basically, you have to boot the throttle and basically half donut it around the corner. Verstappen's actually done it brilliantly in both cars. When he appeared in the 2021 RB16B, and Tsunoda, to his credit, really booted the throttle when he was behind his RB7. Hadjar needs a little bit of assistance. He's basically getting a pushback from someone whose job is basically to stand there and help him so he can get around the car in a couple of goes. But I'm sure he'll get there. Bear in mind, he hasn't had much experience in real Formula One cars before this season, let alone driving one on a situation such as this. So it's really good that a car is back out. As I was saying earlier, our RA272 is meant to be running, but it's too valuable basically. With the rain and the cold, they've effectively decided that they just don't want to risk it. So no runs for Tsunoda in that car. Oh, I think Hadjar might have just caught the front wing on the inside pavement. He's sneaking through now. Oh my God, that thing's loud. No, I don't think he damaged anything. I think he just was tried to boot it round, got a little bit stuck, and then had to just sort of carefully pull away, but didn't need any assistance this time, so he's getting better at those. It's been a slightly strange day so far. It was very, very rainy this morning, very cold, and going back to the 272, that's why that car's not run. It's actually dry now, and temperature's picked up a bit. I don't think it would be a problem to run the car, but they are erring on the side of caution. That is a very valuable car. I can't remember if I said this before because Hadjar rudely interrupted me. Honda's first F1 winner. It's the car that's inspired the Red Bull special livery for this weekend. It's such a shame I don't get to see it and hear it, and obviously everybody here, I'm being selfish, but everybody wants to see it. The crowd had thinned out a little bit in between runs because it had been so quiet. A few have come back now. There's plenty here. As I understand it, 5,000 or 6,000 at least, maybe 7,000. So a decent turnout here just outside of Tokyo itself, just by the Bay Area. So very much Tokyo, just obviously not in the middle of the city. But I am going to get back to trying to find out if we're going to see more cars and shield myself and you on the microphone from any that do emerge and come back past, because I've probably shattered a few eardrums there. But I will check back in very, very shortly once I've heard from Tsunoda and hopefully a couple of the other drivers. Well, thanks to the magic of editing, it's only been a couple of seconds since you last heard me waffling, but for me it's been over 2 hours since I stopped recording the first segment. It's been quite hectic here as the drivers get pulled from place to place, including, of course, Yuki Tsunoda, who is the man of the moment. But after sitting in on a Yuki Tsunoda press conference in Japanese, of which I confess I understood very little, apart from arigato gozaimasu, I did then get the chance to speak to Yuki directly for a few minutes. So rather than hear me prattle on about my thoughts of his prospects, what is in store for him this weekend, hear from the man himself. I apologise in advance for the quality of my questions, but I found Yuki to be very illuminating and interesting, and I hope you will too. So over to Yuki, but first, sadly, me to ask some questions. You seem very kind of at ease with your situation, very confident and comfortable. It looked like that in the showrun as well, when you were coming around the hairpin, drifting the car. How good are you feeling at the moment?
I mean, can't get crazier than this situation, you know. So there are a lot of pressure from Red Bull, and in this home Grand Prix, you know, lots of situation. But I think the only thing I can do is just enjoy for now, and you know, I know that if I feel 100% comfortable with the car, you know, understand about the car, I think the result will come automatically. But now, you know, I just can't wait to hit on the track as soon as possible, and you know, just feel the car from FP1. I'm sure it's gonna be it won't be easy, you know, very time limited, but just have to do as much as possible to you know, give the feedback and make it work. But just for now, yeah, feeling pretty good confidence. Yeah.
How much time have you had to prepare? Obviously, there was only a short gap between races. How much time have you done? How much are you going to be discovering the car in FP1?
Well, I just got 2 days. Fortunately, because of it was Japan, so I had a lot of promotions anyway planned between China and Japan. China and Japan. Had to cancel a couple of things anyway, but yeah, I think preparation we maximize it at least. You know, if you ask me if it's enough, I don't know, but I can't really say confidently yes, but at least I know it was very, very productive 2 days, and we tried a lot of setups, and we at least find a direction we want to go to start at least, and so yeah, FP1 I'm really excited how the car behaves.
Are you avoiding expectations for this weekend? Is it more of a sort of see how you go on Friday and then work out what might be achievable?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really necessarily try and manage or whatever. I think anyway, people are expecting something there, but yeah, Friday is completely unknown. You know, like normally with the racing, you know, you have a bit of expectation, but for me, I really don't have anything. Just drive, do laps, and hopefully, yeah, I'll be up there, but I'm sure it won't be smooth as that. Yeah.
Well, some really interesting reports there from Scott and Luke on the ground in Japan. But Roberto, Yuki Tsunoda, we'll ask you about a non-Italian driver this time. He's going to be the star of the show in Japan this weekend. He's talked about targeting a podium. I think more dreaming of a podium than targeting, if you're a bit more fair with the translation and the sentiment. So what do you expect from him this weekend?
So thinking of a podium is a little bit too much to me, because if McLaren's play like normally McLaren play in this start of the season, it should be faster than Max to get the podium, because normally there is one place on the podium now if you are not McLaren, and if you get it, it's because Max gets some big trouble. Tsunoda made a fantastic job last year, a very good job last year, and I was surprised when in the end Helmut Marko did prefer somebody else to him. I also, if I can just open a bracket, Helmut Marko told to the race about 1 month ago, I prefer not to talk much about Lawson now because he's a rookie, but we are very confident in him. But if I can say one word on Duhan, I will say that very hardly Duhan will be in Formula One at the end of the season. Things started quite differently from what Helmut said. So it's quite strange for him to be so strong on an idea that proved to be quite wrong so far. Tsunoda is strong for sure. In Racing Bulls, he was a fantastic driver. I remember that all the management of the team just talking very good of him last year. I remember a couple of weak points on him, small mistakes and so on. But yes, good. But he goes to a team, Red Bulls, where there is one number one driver, one number two driver. He's definitely number two. And he can learn a lot from Max, for sure. But to me, it's very hard that he thinks to be able to fight Max in a short period of time.
What do you think, Ben? Any chance of a third home podium in the Japanese Grand Prix to go with Aguri Suzuki in 1990 and Kamui Kobayashi in 2012? Had to mention Aguri Suzuki.
Of course, yeah. You'll bring back V10s. Couldn't resist, could you? I think it's extremely unlikely. There has to be some kind of circumstantial affair at play to make that happen. You know, as Roberto said, you'd expect the McLarens to be 1-2 based on current form, and then it's a scrap for the third place between probably George Russell, Verstappen and the Ferraris if they're legal and have everything together that weekend. Tsunoda would do well if he's in that group, maybe fighting with Antonelli. I think it's a very strange situation that they could find themselves where Tsunoda, because he knows the track really well, and that is worth a lot. It would have been the same for Liam Lawson, which is why I find it strange that they've pulled the trigger now, because it doesn't give Lawson the fairest opportunity to show the best of himself on a track he knows and has raced in F1 before. But nevertheless, they've pulled the trigger. You could find that Tsunoda does better relative to Max than Lawson did in the first two races, but still gets out qualified by Lawson in the Racing Bulls car because it's easier to drive and the performance is more accessible. You know, if Yuki can find that really narrow window and just hit it, then yeah, sure, he could be right up there. I don't think he would beat Max, even if he gets close to him by, you know, some good fortune / mix of skills / nailing the setup or what have you. I don't think he'll be able to live in that window to the same degree through a race distance. So he's going to finish behind Max, and it's just a case of where can Max drag the Red Bull, do Ferrari and Mercedes make mistakes that weekend. It's a really tall order for him. I think he's done really well, and he's got certainly that bit between his teeth in terms of, I want to prove a point. I want to prove that they made the wrong decision in the first instance. I think he's come into this season trying to do that anyway, fighting for his career. You know, if this doesn't work out, he's got nothing else, has he? We talked on a previous show that, you know, I think you, Ed, and Scott and John Noble had your provisional 2026 grid with Yuki Tsunoda not on it because, you know, after his, you know, expected season at Racing Bulls, what does he do next? You know, he was kind of like, you know, dead man walking at Red Bull. So there's a lot riding on it for him, and it's a massive chance for him to kind of stake his claim. But given that Red Bull assessed him and Lawson at the end of last year, decided they were much of a muchness, but Lawson had the greater potential because of his inexperience, I don't see how Yuki Tsunoda just suddenly, on the basis of pre-season testing and 2 races with Racing Bulls, turns into this kind of superstar who can be right on Max Verstappen's level and absolutely blow Lawson into the reeds. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you know, Otmar Zafnauer, the host of our sister Team Principal podcast, was saying, well, it's never a controlled experiment and you're trying to predict the future, and you know, it's a difficult thing to do, and then you look back and just have to decide whether you've made the right decision as quickly as possible. But this decision just seems, as I'm sure you've discussed at length, Ed, really confusing, and I don't think it's likely to make a massive difference, in all honesty.
Well, Yuki Tsunoda himself has said that from driving the car in the simulator in Milton Keynes, he says he hasn't struggled to adapt to it. He said he liked the car when he tested it in Abu Dhabi last year, the predecessor car, of course, the 2024 machine. So he's being upbeat and positive and thinks he can adapt, and it's just going to be such a fascinating storyline.
They all are, though, aren't they?
Yes,
Sergio Perez thought he was going to beat Max Verstappen when he joined Red Bull, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, but the good thing is, I think expectations are so low that the bottom line is, if he can do better than Lawson, then that's box one ticked. So
I think he almost automatically will, because of the fact that it's this track that they both know really well. I think he almost can't do worse than Lawson did in the first 2 races relative to Max, but it might not still be enough. You know, if Lawson has a stunning Japanese Grand Prix as well and is ahead of Yuki, or even just right behind him in the inferior car. What do you make of that? It's like, how does Red Bull then, even if they feel like, okay, that's still slightly an upgrade, they're going to spend so long having to justify why they've kind of made a change almost for no reason. I think the only way they win out of this early change is if Lawson has another disaster. They don't want that, because obviously you want him to rebuild his confidence and do well for your second team. But if he's struggling in Suzuka in the sister car and he's behind Hadjar and Yuki's having a decent weekend, then you can say, okay, they were right, going into the Red Bull this soon, shot his confidence, and he's not himself anymore. But that's still a really awful scenario to have to deal with. And that's probably the best outcome in terms of justifying everything that Red Bull's done.
Well, who knows with Red Bull? Lawson could beat Tsunoda and then he's back in for Bahrain, and then Hadjar has a good weekend in Bahrain and he's in for Saudi Arabia. Perhaps this is the new... This is what the Italians would call a grande casino, isn't it, Roberto?
Grosso casino.
Oh, grosso casino.
With the words of Mr. Niki Lauda, grosso casino, grosso casino.
Excellent. I get my Italian right. I've at least learned something from this podcast. Anyway, I think that's a good moment to end on. So thanks very much to Ben, and thanks very much, Roberto, for your first appearance. It's been great to have you on. I'm sure we will have you on again. Well, our guys are on the ground now in Japan, so stay with us for everything you need to know from Suzuka.
The Athletic.